Today's case is a little bit more true crimey than the original subject matter I covered, which is more supernatural, UFO, missing, suspicious people kind of stuff. But I thought this case fit perfectly for my channel. It's weird, it's mysterious, it's scary. So I just wanted to tell it because it was interesting to me, and I think you guys would love it as well. So yeah, let's get into it. Our story covers a girl named Candace Hiltz. Candace was 17 years old, and she was super smart. She was known around school with her friends and family for being like a savant for her age. She was very intelligent for her age. She actually had dreams of being a Supreme Court justice one day, so that was kind of what she was working towards. She had a kid. The kid was just under a year old. Candace and her nearly 1-year-old daughter lived with Candace's mom in a place called Cooper Gulch in Colorado. I've never heard of it. I tried to look it up too. It seems like a really small little place. But so they lived there together, the three of them. And Candace had a brother as well. And her brother was he had a lot of mental health issues. Her brother had been in and out of some mental health wards and stuff, you know, trying to get help. And as he got older, he realized that he didn't like to be around people. He hated being around people. He hated interacting with people. He just wanted to do his own thing by himself and live life by himself. So he ended up living in the woods most of his time by himself, and he would try to avoid interacting with people at all costs. I mean, he didn't have friends. He didn't hang out with anybody as far as they know. I mean, he was a recluse. A lot of people kind of bullied her brother and, you know, kind of gave him a hard time for his mental health issues. And a lot of times the police would try to pin crimes on him just because he was known for having these issues. And, you know, anytime a crime would happen in the area, they would look to him. All right, so cut to August 10th of 2006. And the police had visited Candace's home, and they were talking to her and her mom about a trespassing charge that they thought that her brother had been involved in. So this cop is at their house, and he is questioning them about what could have happened. And as he's doing this, Candace is getting more and more upset. And you know, she is tired of her brother constantly getting blamed for things, and at this point in time, she had just had enough of it, and she started getting really angry with the sheriff's deputy that was there. He wasn't very happy with her getting angry with him and raising her voice, so he threatened to arrest her as well. And Candace, you know, puts out her wrists and tells the officer, go ahead, you know, I'm sure the other deputies would love to hear that I've seen you around town exchanging money with local drug dealers. And when the officer heard this, he was suddenly like more than happy to go. And so he got all mad, you know, huffed and puffed and ran back to his car and left, right? So that was the end of that. You know, finally that altercation was done. Everybody was happy, except the officer, I guess. And everybody went on their merry way. So 3 days after that, Candace's dog randomly goes missing. It's super random, right? Her dog just vanishes out of the middle of nowhere. And you know, they thought at the time, they were like, oh, well, we live in Colorado, so it could be a mountain lion or, you know, some big animal could have gotten the dog. You know, it's plausible. Unfortunately, things are going to take a much darker turn than a mountain lion. 2 days pass after this, so August 15th, I believe, and Candace is staying home with her child, and her mom is out running some errands around town. And so from here, a lot of the details are kind of spotty. The police reported it one way, Candace's mom reported it another way. You know, the newspapers reported it a different way. The exact details of what happened next are very difficult to interpret and figure out exactly what happened. But basically, from what I have gathered, Candace's mom was calling Candace over and over and over, and she couldn't get in touch with Candace. She was worried, so she went home. When she got home, she found the child, Candace's almost 1-year-old, laying on the floor by herself crying in the middle of the living room, and she couldn't find Candace anywhere. And she said that she saw pools of blood splatter kind of like around the house, but she wasn't sure like what it was from. You know, she didn't think a ton of it at the time. She was more worried about finding her daughter. So she's looking around the house when she walks into a bedroom. When she walks into the bedroom, she notices a blanket sticking out from underneath the bed. And so she walks over, examines it, pulls it out, and she realizes there's something inside. And so she unravels it, and unfortunately she finds Candace's deceased body inside. And she said that Candace's head had been shot so many times that it looked like she had been decapitated, that like 70% of her head was missing from bullet wounds. Sorry for the gory details, that's what happened. That'll come into play here more in the next little bit. So she calls the police, they file a report, and they start looking everywhere for suspects for who this might have been. Now from here it gets really bad really fast for the police. So first things first, Dolores, Candace's mom, said that she could not believe how bad of a job they did securing the crime scene. She said that they left things behind. The blanket that Candace had been wrapped in was left behind. They did it. Another thing is they did not tape off the crime scene. You know, whenever they have a crime scene, they're supposed to tape it off so that no evidence gets tampered with, nothing gets disturbed. They didn't do that. Another thing left behind was a towel that had been used to wipe down blood that they believed was used by one of the suspects, left behind in the house. Another thing was a bloody t-shirt that they believe Candace might have been wearing or had worn at some point during everything, also left behind. A computer monitor stained in Candace's blood that was used to prop up the bed so that they could fit her underneath was also left behind. Which I don't know why they used a computer monitor to prop up a bed, but apparently that was something that happened. Another thing they left behind was a few bullet casings, shotgun casings I believe, that were found in the baby's crib that the police had left behind. So all the evidence they could find, they wrapped it up and tried to send it into the police office, and the police office didn't even act like they wanted it. I mean, they seemed like, it was just a whole thing. She was very upset about it. She said that they weren't taking the case seriously. So they're looking everywhere for suspects, looking for evidence. 3 days later, when they were searching the property, looking around the woods, around the house, looking for evidence, they found the dog, Candace's dog, tied to a tree in the middle of the woods, and it had been killed by a hatchet. Somebody had hatcheted the dog to death in the middle of the woods. So a lot of people think this is because, they wanted to get rid of the dog so the dog wouldn't give them problems when they went to attack Candace or whatever. So they took the dog out first and then eventually went for Candace. That's what the theory is, or maybe they did it to try and scare her first before they went for her. We're not really sure, but we know somebody took that dog out in the woods, killed it, and then eventually came back for Candace. We can pretty safely assume that those were the same people. So Deputy Briscoe and Deputy Dodd were put in charge of the investigation. Now I've seen mixed reports. Some articles say that one of these guys was the same person that Candace had talked to that came to her house that day when she yelled at them and told them about them accepting money from drug dealers. Some articles don't include that and don't say that at all. So I'm not really sure if that's true, but if that is true, that changes everything. That really makes things look bad for that guy and bad for the family too, because obviously he has a bias in what happens next with the investigation. So yeah, that part I'm kind of unclear on, but it may have been the same person. We'll say that. So a day after the murder and 2 days before they even found the dog, they immediately started blaming James, Candace's brother, for the murder. Immediately. They looked at him as their number one suspect. It started pointing at him immediately. Unfortunately for him, it was an easy target. They just started, he doesn't like to be around people. He has mental health issues. For them, it was just someone they could point to. And then on top of that, he lived in the woods near their house. And 3 days after that, the same day that they found the dog, they found James in the wood, living in the woods near, I believe it's a place called Cannon City, which is near Cooper Gulch, which is where the family lived. So the authorities think that maybe he might have been the one that did it. I mean, they seem pretty sure about it, although he never got charged with it. You know, they never arrested him for the murder of Candace, although they tried their hardest, but they were never able to pin it down on him. So once the autopsy was done and they were able to look at her head closer, they were able to reveal that she had been shot once in the face with a shotgun, 5 times in the back of the head with a small caliber gun, and then shot once through the heart with a medium caliber gun. And a lot of people believe that she might have been shot by all these weapons at the same time. That's what the autopsy report said, although we're not 100% sure. Now, given the fact that she was shot by 3 different weapons, potentially by 3 different people at potentially the same exact time, that would imply that there, was multiple people at the scene. So that theoretically would mean that James has a very high likelihood of being involved in this case. He hates being around people. He doesn't have any friends. He lives in the woods by himself purposefully so that he can avoid being around people. It just doesn't make sense that he would grab some friends and go kill his sister who was just standing up for him a few days before. I mean, I don't think there's any evidence that they had any issue with one another, and if he was going to just kill her, why? What's the motivation? There's no motivation for him to do that. Same for why he would kill the dog, and why would he not kill the baby? It doesn't make any sense. So that's another big detail that seems to imply that her brother probably was not involved in the murder, although the police would love to blame him. So 10 years go by, and there's no breaks in the case. They keep pointing at James, but they're not able to get anything to stick. Then, in December 2016, the case took a crazy turn. A man named Rick Ratzlaff bought the contents of an abandoned storage unit for $50 in an auction at a storage facility outside of Canyon City. It was one of those, you know how they do like those storage war shows and stuff? It was one of those type auctions. Weirdly, the storage unit had been rented by Lieutenant Detective Robert Dodd, which, if you remember, is one of the people that was put in charge of this case. But unfortunately, Lieutenant Dodd fell behind on his payments, and therefore all of his stuff got sold. Which, it's insane that he ever allowed this to happen given what was found inside the storage unit. So inside the storage unit, there was a manila envelope that said evidence on it, a hatchet, a rope, a bloody sock, and a green backpack that contained a bloody shirt. So the big question is, why would this detective have all this stuff in his storage unit just sitting there? They're not allowed to bring evidence like this home with them, especially for 10 years. And why this particular case? Why this one? Why is this one so particular to him, and why is he trying to hide evidence for that case? A lot of people think it was because he was friends with or knew or was the person that came to the Hiltz house that day and got yelled at and called out by Candace for taking money from drug dealers. So as though Dodd couldn't make himself look more guilty, he tried to reach out to Ratzlaff and buy the stuff back. He said, "Hey, that's my stuff. I accidentally missed the payments. Can you give it back to me?" After he found out that he had found all this stuff. They tried to keep it under wraps, and Ratzlaff was like, "No, man, like, you're shady, and I think you had something to do with Candace. So I'm gonna give it to the police, and they can do what they want to do with it." And apparently Dodd reached out to them time and time again and told him, don't, can I please buy, or please don't do this. But it gets even crazier. Even the sheriff went to Ratzlaff and told him that he should be very careful, that if he released this stuff to the police, his life would be in danger. And that he needs to be careful because someone would be keeping a close eye on him. So after all this stuff was found, the sheriff and Dodd, Lieutenant Dodd, such a fun name to say, were put on administrative leave for taking evidence, and just being irresponsible in general, essentially, and potentially for being involved in this case. 112 days after that, Dodd mysteriously resigned from his job. And in May of 2017, he was charged with stealing the evidence that he had in his storage unit. Another article says that it was June 2018 that Dodd was arrested and charged for taking the evidence. I think the charge was it was a 1 misdemeanor count of abuse of public records and 2 counts of official misconduct related to the evidence found in the storage unit. He was sentenced to 180 days on the misdemeanor charge, and then he was sentenced to 165 days suspended from his job. He was also hit with a $500 fine for the misdemeanor and I believe a $250 fine for the other one, which is like that $750 for getting away with murder, essentially. I mean, well, that's the idea anyways, but you would think that this would cause a lot more questions than it did. I mean, why did he have all this stuff? Why was it so personal to him? And these were like one of just a few things in this storage unit as well. I mean, it's not like he had evidence from a bunch of other cases maybe he was obsessing over or something. No, this was this one case. So we're not really sure why he had such an interest in this case, unless his friend or him were involved somehow. He says that the reason he took it was because he wanted a more comprehensive report of the evidence. And that's why. But why has it been sitting in your locker for 10 years? Where's that comprehensive report? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, he's clearly lying. And unfortunately, after that, we don't really have any other answers. You know, I personally think that the sheriff's department was likely involved. I think that Candace messed with the wrong person, called him out for something shady he was doing, and he was afraid that it was going to get him in trouble. And him and his friends went over there and handled it. You know, sheriff's deputies are known to look after each other. And I think that he was upset. She messed with him, that she said what she said. And unfortunately, that was it for her. Hopefully, down the line, we can get more answers and they can find out who this was concretely. But given how tampered the scene was, how horribly they handled the evidence, how horribly they handled the case, the fact that it's been years now since all this happened, it just doesn't seem likely that we'll get any satisfaction out of this. I think this case is just so interesting because it shows that, like, people in power, if you question them or go after them, it's, you know, they can shut you down without anybody knowing, and they can make you and your family look like the bad guy while they get away scot-free. It's scary to think about, and I just wanted to make a video about this just because I found this case really interesting. I thought you guys would too. So yeah, thank you for watching. I will make a video again next week, hopefully. We'll see. I've been a little bit behind lately, but I made one this week, and I promise you, I'm gonna make the day in the life in New York video. I'm just trying to come up with some cool things to do, to film. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next week, hopefully. And yeah, I love you. Bye.